Hi, this is Beth Ritter-Guth, and we're in Module 2. We're discussing ethical use of materials and privacy considerations in online environments. So this is just a summary and recapitulation of the readings for this module, but I wanted to highlight a few things that are very important to us in education. Our agenda for this brief tutorial is to discuss the definitions of copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons, and then talk a little bit about what FERPA is. So, the definition of copyright. Copyright is the exclusive rights that are granted to the creator of an original work of authorship that has been fixed in tangible form, in a fixed physical medium. So, what's not covered are impromptu speeches, things that come off the cuff, jam sessions, and what is copyrighted immediately upon being fixed in tangible form. The second something goes online, the second it's put on paper, on film, a sculpture, anything painted, any kind of code. Once it hits a physical form on paper or film or clay or paint, it is copyrighted, and you do not need to get a license or anything from the Copyright Office. It is immediately copyrighted. So that's really important, because that means that in the United States, either a work is copyrighted or it's in the public domain. And for a long time, there was no bridge license, and we're going to talk about the Creative Commons license and how that bridges those licenses. So everything is copyrighted unless it is in public domain, and there are all kinds of rules for public domain, but you should always assume that something is copyrighted unless it specifically says that it's in the public domain. So, the way it works here in the United States, a work is automatically copyrighted once it's been fixed in tangible form. You do not need to register your work with the U.S. Patent or Copyright Offices. And the only reason that you would register is that if you're a big company like Disney, you'll always copyright your work, because you can litigate for both actual and statutory damages when copyright is infringed. So for big corporations, that's really, really important. But for most of us, we don't need immediate copyright. If you're publishing a book, it'll get an ISBN, and that's its copyright stamp. So. But for the most part, big corporations, big companies that have to protect their trademark also copyright. But you automatically get it the second your thought hits a tangible form. So what are the rights that come with copyright? Well, copyright gives you the exclusive control over your work, and that means that it can only be reproduced with your permission. It can only be, somebody can add to it or detract from it, or create a work like a sequel to it. We call that derivative works, with your permission. It can only be distributed with your permission. It can only be performed or displayed in public by your permission. So in the opposite license is public domain, which means that you can reproduce freely, you can make works from the work, you can distribute it freely, you can perform it and display it in public. And so those are the two licenses, the copyright license and the public domain. So the bridge license is this Creative Commons license, and what that is a simple, standardized way to give public permission to share and use creative work. And then it's based on your conditions. There are several different kinds of Creative Commons licenses. For example, one license allows you to use a work just so long as you give proper attribution. You say where you got it from. Other rights say, I don't care if you use my name or not, but I don't want you to sell it for profit, because I didn't sell it for profit, and neither should you. So you can pick all different kinds of Creative Commons licenses for your work, and you can get those licenses at creativecommons.org. Okay, so let's talk about some tips for using specific tools and in and out of Angel. Videos, the bottom line for almost every resource, actually for every resource, is that if you can provide a link to it, you're good as gold. Because the way that the law works is that you are responsible for what you post online. If you link to somebody else, the responsibility of whether it's copyrighted protected or not falls on the person who originally posted it. So you don't get in trouble for linking over. So when in doubt, link. In a face-to-face setting, if you were in a face-to-face class, you can use a purchased video that you bought, like at the video store, so long as you're tying it directly to the curriculum. If you're just showing them a movie for fun, and it's not attached to the curriculum, then that's considered a public viewing, a public showing of the work, and that is protected by copyright. You cannot edit or produce a work by adding to it or manipulating the images or the audio, sticking other characters in, or anything like that. So you can show movies in class. The way that Angel Blackboard is defined by the government, it is considered a classroom. So you may put a full-length video within Angel. It would be very hard for students to stream in its full form, but you could do it legally and ethically. The same policies actually apply to audio that apply to video. Link whenever possible, so you can play a song from a recording so long as it ties to the curriculum, like if you have a poem on CD or something. But you can't edit it. You can't edit the front sounds, like the actual main text, and you can't edit the background sounds. You can't put like a hidden message behind it or anything. When we talk about documents, the golden rule is that you may distribute 10% of any one work. So if you have a journal article from, Biology Quarterly, usually one article is 10%. So you can physically pass out that article. What gets tricky is you can also post that article in Angel, because Angel is a classroom. What you can't do is you can't download it, make it a PDF, and then put it out on a wiki for the public to have. You can only put it in a closed garden or in a classroom. So you can give it to your students, but you can't give it to the world. And of course, you can't change the words or graphics from the original. When we talk about photos, we always want to look for Creative Commons photos that we can use. If you go into Google, if you go into Flickr and you go into Advanced Search, you can click on Creative Commons licensed photos. They're also called royalty-free photos. So if you want to Google that, royalty-free photos, you can find lots of great photos to use in your class. Whenever possible, link down only usable images that are royalty-free, and then of course you want to name them, because sometimes they come with just numbers. You want to name them so that you remember where you got them, so that you can provide a citation, and of course you don't want to alter unless you have permission under the Creative Commons license. So when in doubt, always link. If you link, you will never have to worry about it. And it's actually a lot easier if you link, because then you don't have to do a lot of work. 2, if you don't know if if you're using a work ethically, just come by and ask me, and I'll let you know. And if I'm not around, you can find answers to your questions. And if you're absolutely in doubt, don't put the material up. Remove it from your site until you find out whether or not you can use it or not. So what's the worst case scenario? Well, what's the worst thing that can happen to you if you get caught breaking copyright? Well, in addition to looking unprofessional, which you could look if you wanted, I guess, if your students found out about it, the worst thing that can happen to you is that the copyright owner must give you 30 days to remove the content. So you'll get a cease and desist letter from Disney, for example, and then you have 30 days to pull the content down off the website. So as long as you've made a good faith to do that, you're fine. So really, there's nobody going to just jump out at you at any time and take you to jail for breaking copyright. So that handles our discussion about copyright and ethical use of materials. And now we're going to briefly talk about FERPA in an online environment. FERPA is the privacy law for higher education, and it's exactly like the HIPAA law. You never ever share private information about students with anybody else. If you're in a discussion forum and you're sort of summarizing what everybody talked about, you can identify students using their first name and their last initial. So I would be Beth R. You can never talk to parents, friends, or anybody about a student's work. You can't talk to colleagues about a particular student. The only exception is that if you're talking about a situation that concerns a student, student safety or well-being, and you're speaking to a supervisor, or you're speaking in an environment where you're working to help the student, you can talk about the student. And then if you're in a meeting with a general population, you can discuss the situation, but you can't give any identifying factors. So these are all the rules that govern FERPA and copyright. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We're going to move now to some activities that will help solidify this content for you, and I look forward to our next module.